guys, have you ever heard the phrase, "Don't judge a book by its cover"? Do you know what that means? It means that you have to read the book to know if it's a good book or a bad book. You can't judge the book just by how it looks from the outside. A really, really good story could have a very boring looking cover on it. So you can't just say, oh, that book would be boring. You really need to read the book to know if it's a good book or not. We're going to read a book today. It's called What Do You See When You See Me? And this book is about a little girl who goes to visit her grandmother at the nursing home, and there's an old woman that lives there that she is very scared of because she doesn't really know this woman, and this woman seems mean. But remember, you can't judge a book by its cover. What Do You See When You See Me? Written by Jeannie St. John Taylor and illustrated by Kathleen Kimley. Katrina peered down the hallway of the nursing home. Please don't let mean old Agnes be awake today, she prayed. Keeping close to the wall, she took 3 more steps, then craned her neck to look down the hall. A wrinkled old woman with tufts of gray hair sticking out in every direction slumped in a chair near the room of Katrina's grandmother. A cane lay across the old woman's lap. Oh no, gulped Katrina. She's there. She pressed back against the wall, her heart thumping. Her hands felt damp. Please let her be asleep. Slowly she leaned forward and peeked around the corner. A snore as loud as a chainsaw greeted her. Phew, Katrina sighed with relief. Clutching the plate of cookies, here she is, holding this plate of cookies that she's bringing to her grandmother. So clutching the plate of cookies she had brought and looking straight ahead, Katrina tiptoed past old Agnes. The elderly woman gave a loud snort. Katrina froze. Without breathing, she turned her head to look at the old woman. Old Agnes's eyes were still closed. Whew, close call. Katrina let out her breath quickly. She reached over and opened her grandmother's door, a crack. Inside the room, she could see her grandmother napping in bed. Katrina hesitated outside the door. Suddenly, from the hallway behind her, a rasping voice said, "What do you see when you see me?" Katrina jumped and whirled around, nearly dropping the cookies. Old Agnes's blue eyes bore into her. Katrina's hand slipped from the door handle. She heard her own heart hammering in her ears. Old Agnes was continuing to stare at her. The door to grandmother's room silently swung shut. Icy fear quivered down Katrina's spine. What? Mumbled Katrina. What do you see when you see me? Agnes repeated. Her shriveled mouth bunched forward. She jabbed her cane in Katrina's direction. Katrina was too scared to move away. Her feet felt glued to the floor. Do you see a cranky old woman with a wrinkled face? Agnes leaned forward and thumped the tip of her cane on the tile floor. Her eyes held onto Katrina. Do you see twisted hands and skinny, useless legs? Agnes leaned even closer, and her quivering voice asked again, What do you see when you see me? Katrina struggled to sort out her thoughts. I do see a cranky old woman with wrinkles, she thought, but it would be mean to say so. Here's the next picture. I didn't always look like this. Agnes adjusted herself in her chair and rested one hand on the top of her cane. When I was your age, my cheeks glowed rosy in the summer sun. I ran through the grass barefooted. Dark curls bounced around my face. Agnes's eyes softened. I had a daddy, you know. At bedtime, I sat on his lap while he told me stories. Then he tucked me in bed and tickled me before he kissed me good night. Her eyes darted back to Katrina. Is that what you see when you look at me? A little girl with a mommy and a daddy who loved her? Katrina's voice stuck in her throat. She couldn't picture Agnes as a young girl with parents who loved her. She couldn't imagine anyone loving her. I swam in the Olympics. Agnes tipped up her chin. I didn't win, but when I arrived home, thousands of people were waiting at the docks to welcome me. They cheered and waved. A famous actor sent me flowers every day for a week, until I told him I was already in love with Harold. Agnes no longer looked at Katrina. It was now Katrina who stared at Agnes with new eyes. There's Miss Agnes thinking about when she was young and she came back from the Olympics and there were people there to greet her. She's thinking about that time. I married Harold 2 years later, in the spring. My sisters decorated the church with lilac and white lilies. Mother made my gown from satin and handmade lace and let me borrow her pearls. The old woman spoke quietly. It's a picture of her when she was young and getting married. Again, she's dreaming and thinking about that. Harold said my skin was softer than rose petals. Agnes' twisted fingers fluttered up to touch her withered cheek. We were so happy. I thought it would never end. After a long silence, Agnes wiped away a tear. Katrina thought she should say something, but instead she just sat there waiting. Let's look at the picture. Here's Miss Agnes with another memory in her head. And here's Katrina just sitting on the floor listening to her. When Agnes finally spoke again, sobs choked her voice. But the war came. Agnes dropped her head. Harold said it was his duty to fight. He looked so handsome in his uniform. We waved goodbye. The hand in Agnes's lap twitched. I stood on the platform until his train disappeared from view. He died in the first battle of the war, saving the lives of 9 of his men. The old woman gave a little shudder. I never remarried. I never wanted any man but Harold. I'm sorry, Katrina whispered. That was a long time ago. Agnes sat up straighter. There she is. Now she's not crying anymore. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Harold was a Christian man. When he and I accepted Jesus, he gave me this lovely necklace. I know I'll see him again in heaven. That's a great comfort to me. Old Agnes knows Jesus? The thought stunned Katrina. Wasn't she always trying to poke people with her cane? She couldn't be a Christian, could she? Agnes's voice pulled Katrina's thoughts back to the present. My youngest son is a doctor, she said. He is? Katrina's thoughts shifted, following old Agnes as she abruptly changed subjects. Oh, yes, I'm proud of him. Of both my children, Agnes said. I taught school to support them while they were growing up. I loved my students, but my own children, why, they are more precious to me than life. There she has a little locket that she wears around her neck that has a picture of her 2 children in it. Do they visit you a lot? Asked Katrina. The closest one lives 2 hours away, Agnes said. It's hard for them to come see me because they're so busy with their own lives. Agnes's blue eyes fastened on Katrina again. That's why I always wave my cane and call out to you. I keep hoping you'll talk to me. You've got the same spunk my daughter had at your age." Oh, Katrina is finding something out. Old Agnes wasn't trying to poke her with her cane. She was just waving it to get her attention. Katrina's throat tightened. She blinked back tears. "You were trying to get my attention?" "Yes," Agnes said, "but I'm invisible to you. Just a useless old woman in a nursing home." Agnes's eyes pled with Katrina. "Is that what you see when you see me, a worthless old woman?" Katrina knelt in front of Agnes. She reached for the old woman's gnarled hand and stroked it without speaking. It felt softer than rose petals. Lifting her eyes, she gazed into Agnes's face. She looked past the wrinkles, past the brown age spots, past the sagging skin. She looked deep into the blue of the old woman's eyes. "When I look at you," Katrina said, "I see a new friend, and she's beautiful to me." Aww. Here's Katrina holding old Agnes's hand. Oh, now she's going back to the nursing home, and she has 2 plates of cookies. Who do you think those 2 plates of cookies are for? One for her grandmother, and one for old Miss Agnes. Yeah. So what did Katrina learn in this story? She thought that old Miss Agnes was just an old grouchy woman, always poking her cane at her. Katrina was afraid of her because she didn't really know her. And so she made a judgment just based on what Miss Agnes looked like on the outside. And she didn't really understand what Miss Agnes was doing when she was waving her cane around. She made a judgment thinking that Miss Agnes was being mean. But when she got to know Miss Agnes, she realized that Miss Agnes wasn't mean. She just wanted to have Katrina talk to her and to see her as a person that had a life, a very full, wonderful life. She had been a little girl like Katrina at one time, and then she fell in love and got married and grieved over her husband dying in the war, and she had children that she loved. She had a whole life that Katrina didn't know anything about. But once Katrina found out about Agnes's life, she could see past the outside of Agnes and see the inside. She could see her heart, and then she could love her. And that's what we all need to do. See past the outside of a person and get to know them, get to know their heart, get to know what they love, what makes them angry, what makes them sad. And then we can love that person because we can understand them. Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. I love you. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.